Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're going to work on a Shakespeare Alpha today, and we're going to show you how to correct the problem that this reel came in for. This reel is very noisy. And I had previewed this on one of my YouTube shorts. It's my belief that it is a bad ball bearing. And this reel has been used in salt water. You can tell because there's some salt buildup on the sides here. The screws, which are steel screws, are pretty much all rusted. Hopefully we'll be able to get those out. And my guess is that with the sand I'm seeing on the rotor here and on the corners, this was used in the surf. And there's a good chance that it's possible that this reel even got dunked. But something caused that steel bearing, in my opinion, to seize, or at least to wash out all the fluid and rust. And we're going to get underneath this. We'll see if we can repair this one and give this one a second chance. So I like to start by taking off the exterior pieces and parts. And as I do, I want to thank our first responders and essential personnel. They are our local hometown heroes, every one of them trying to make life as usual as it could be pre-pandemic, and we thank them for their efforts. All right, we can see we have a better amount of that salt and corrosion buildup here. I'm going to use the WD-40, and I'm just going to put that on all the screws while I'm at it. I don't want to tear up the reel or risk breaking off a screw. So if you just kind of just a little squirt on there while you're working on it, it will help to break those screws free. All right, most of the time when you turn a reel, if the side button is not turning, it's an indication that that handle is a screw handle, that it screws into the main gear. But every now and then you should check. Now I don't believe that's the case here, but sometimes you will find that there's a screw underneath here, particularly on reels like the Shimano and the Daiwas. The older Daiwas will use screws there. This one does not have that screw, so I'm going to put that little side plate cap nut right back on. And we'll go over to remove the handle from this side. The handle screws in a clockwise manner to remove it. That's got a lot of squeak in that handle, so we're going to put some penetrating oil on there and on the points where it collapses. And this time it's just kind of used as a rust preventative and a light lubrication. And then we'll come over and we'll take the case off. We'll show you how the reel is made. And if we have a replacement bearing, we'll do that. And if not, we'll at least know what we need to do in order to complete the servicing on this reel. So these Shakespeare Alphas have been around a long time as a sub-brand of Shakespeare. It's one of the more popular ones. They were originally metal-cased reels, and I would guess that they go back to the 70s. This one's probably around late 90s and maybe early 2000s. They had a one before this, which was a big old graphite edition when they first started going to graphite cases. Well, this is since then, and it's attractive. The case will clean up nicely. It's got the sand and all of the debris on it, but the paint on the case and everything is in good condition otherwise. And I'm thinking maybe the rusted bearing is just a matter of it being in the water, near the water. Sometimes the salt spray from the water will get you on that, and we'll see. I put the 4 screws on my table because I wanted to make sure that those side plate screws were the same. And we can do that. Those can come over here now. And trying to determine whether the side plate comes out. It's hard to see there. Now the side plate goes up and under, so we're going to need to remove the rotor to get there. And this one's kind of making me wonder here now, because I don't believe that this can come off easy. This should be able to pull up. I'm not seeing it, so if you run into that problem, we'll do the workaround here. It's always good to show folks that there's more than one way. So what we want to do on this one is we want to remove the collar from the rotor nut. And there's a little kind of tie down. And now we should have, I think that's going to be a 10 or a 12 millimeter. It looks like an 11 millimeter. You're going to want to open that up. Once you break that screw, you can kind of remove it with your hand, but you can get that anyway. Let's try that again. Now I think I got it. And we're going to loosen it up because the side plate here goes under the rotor, and in order for you to remove that side plate, you have to loosen up the rotor. This is a good place to tell you to take pictures along the way. It's not often that you can find schematics for a reel like this. I think we're seeing already what the true cause is there. If you look underneath here, there's all kinds of sand. There's no question that that's the cause of the bearing seizing. All right, I've pulled the rotor up now. Oh, I could have got that out. How do you like that? I just wasn't good enough about it. Well, we're going to continue anyway. The inside of this is dry. That's good news, I guess, if you've sanded a reel. And we're going to remove the axle shaft so we can take the rest of these pieces and parts off. I put all my pieces and parts into a parts tray. That's where I know where they belong. This is nothing more than the bottom of a plastic milk jug. All right, there's sand here. When you're working on your bench with sand, my recommendation is when you go to clean the parts, please keep them outside or off of the reel itself and off of the bench. That way you don't have sand transferring to the next reel. All right, here's the axle shaft. Now come the pieces with that. So those were the two parts that went there. This is the part that goes in there as a little tie down. And you can just see we are absolutely loaded with sand in there. So we're going to go wash that off. And we're going to continue with this. Before I go washing, you might as well just run this video to its logical stop point. I'm going to take a needle nose pliers and remove the crosswind block. Yes, it's called an oscillation block on some. I call them crosswind gears and blocks. Now we have the spring which came loose. This is an oscillation spring. It belongs on here. That came loose, so I guess we didn't have much of an anti-reverse in this reel either. It's kind of hard to test that. And then I'm going to remove the two screws. Then it's a logical stopping point because I'm going to see if I can find a replacement bearing for this. And we can continue with how to service this reel. So this is a single ball bearing reel, and the ball bearing is sitting on top here on the pinion gear. So now we should be able to pull up and out on this, just like that. And we can see all kinds of rust. That's just a horrible example of a bad bearing. And this is a good place to stop the video. I'm going to squirt down this rusted bearing here so that I can get it off the shaft. Before I go too much further, I'm going to clean that little spring that belongs on the anti-reverse piece. There is a groove in that little ring. You want to make sure that it gets inserted into that groove. And you want to make sure that it's pointed in the right direction, which this is the right direction for it. Once you do that, just kind of rotate it, make sure that it swings nicely. And what I'm finding here is that there's sand in that. There's sand in everything on this. So that's probably how that piece came off. It just got trying to swing around and got sanded there as well. But if you have the time and the patience, you can repair a sanded reel. And that's kind of what we're doing here. In this case, I picked this up at a flea market. It was relatively inexpensive. And knowing what I know and knowing that I probably have a replacement bearing somewhere, I decided I'll give it a shot. I bought a whole lot of them. I think there was 5 or 6 in the lot. And at that point, you can take a risk. If you're only going to buy one and you thought maybe you could go ahead and use it right away, well, then you're probably going to have a little more trouble there. Okay, that looks good. I'm just going to spray that down with some penetrating oil there just to let that rest. And grab that little hook spring. Those will go into my parts tray. The collar will go into my parts tray. It's time to stop the video now, clean up the case, clean up the rotor, and then we'll come back and see if we can replace that bearing and make this reel work. Okay, so a few things have gone on since we left this. The first was my search for the bearing, and you can tell this one's just completely frozen, but I'm kind of a hoarder. If I have a broken reel that still has some bearings in them, I generally tend to keep them, and surprisingly, the bearings match up. Now, when you match a bearing, it has to match the inside diameter as well as the outside diameter, as well as the width of the bearing. So this one can be replaced, and I'm looking forward to doing that. The other thing is I cleaned out the sand inside the rotor. I realized that, well, we have a gap here that can open up into the trip mechanism for your bail. And when I tested the bail, it was gritty. So I normally say do not take the bail off unless it needs service. Well, in this case, it needed the service. It needed to be cleaned out. I was able to do that. And we're going to go ahead and put that cover right back on. There was a lot of sand nested inside the rotor on the top cap, and of course it was the salt water that destroyed that bearing. So we're hopeful now that this one can be put back together again and given that second chance. We'll go find out. All right, so we have the rotor case now. We're going to start the reassembly. Here's my pinion gear. I've cleaned the gear, one final wipe here, just to show you what I've done off camera. You want to just use a brush. This is just grease now from the brush, but use a brush to clean all of the debris out of the channels of that pinion gear. That way, if there's sand in there or whatever, you'll be able to take care of that. And then we're going to use a fishing reel grease. I'm going to use Penn Precision reel grease for this. Use a fishing reel grease. And make sure that you give this a lot of grease now, because we've pretty much taken care to take everything off of this due to that sand condition. So be liberal with your grease in this situation. I'm going to put that replacement bearing back on. And on the replacement bearing, I like oil, not grease. So I'm going to oil that one. And we should be able to reset this into the cavity. And you press down, and this is how you also know that you've got the right bearing match, because it's not sitting proud on that cavity there. Next up then is the tie down for the bearing. And this bearing tie down has a pointed set to it. That's the clears over here, so don't put it on the other way. If you put it on the other way, it's not going to sit properly, and you're only going to have trouble there. Okay, that's a Phillips head. It's a magnetic Phillips head. It's one of those cases I think I need another hand, but we'll try and get this going with what I have here. So it's a good time to mention, if you like these types of videos, please subscribe to my channel. And if you do subscribe, please hit the notification button. That way you'll see all of the videos that I post. I post on all kinds of things, and this one happens to be a spinning reel, but I do all kinds of conventional reels, bait casters, whatever comes in my shop. And you're basically looking over my shoulder in my shop, seeing how I diagnose a problem like this one with the bad bearing, and then you're also learning how to correct that issue in the reel repair. So if you like it, please subscribe. All right, we said that the next one up then is this hook. You'll notice that there's a flat side of this little eccentric post, and there's a little cup section here. This is not a flat piece. That cup belongs as kind of the bushing for the bearing there. And then this arm goes in the slot of that anti-reverse dog. You can give it a try now. You can spin it one way, you'll see it pulls it in, and then as you go to back it off, it'll push it out. That's how that's supposed to work. Okay, drop of oil onto the dog. You can put a drop of oil into the case here where the override is. Turn the override and just make sure everything is riding fine there. Now we can go ahead and put the bottom of the reel together. We have our Oscillation gear or Crosswind gear, your choice on naming. You want to get somewhere it's going to ride on the stud. You want to get grease onto the back where it's going to ride against the plate. You want to get grease into the teeth, which are going to be driven from the back of the main gear. And then you want to get grease on the front, which is where the Crosswind block is going to ride. Once all of that is done, you can put that over the stud and press it in just like that. We cleaned up the main gear. There was no evidence of sand in here, which is good because that sand totally would have degraded the teeth. And you probably would have wound up with a replacement. And now we'll get it onto the back as well. I just heard that shim washer fall off there on the main gear, so let's go put that back on. The manufacturers put those shim washers on there to even out the case. If there's a little play in the main gear, that shim washer comes on to steady that. All right, main gear goes in. Now we want to get our Crosswind block. I don't think I cleaned this Crosswind block, so let me wipe it off right now. The Crosswind block, the only thing that's going to ride is this backside, so that's all it really needs lubrication. You want to get it in the channel, you want to get it on the face, and you can place that over the stud just like that. Once you do that, then I think we can take our axle shaft, wipe that down. Surprisingly, with all of that sand and salt water, the axle shaft survived. This probably should have pulled up. There's a crossbar in here. I imagine you can knock it off if you want and just kind of go up that way. No need to, but I'm thinking maybe that's frozen on with the salt corrosion as well, which is why I struggled a little bit with that side plate removal. When you put the grease on an axle shaft, don't put a lot on. It's only going to squeeze out as you come through the top. All right, next up then is the rotor. And you want to find the key that sits in here and rides on the side. So get it centered on the side. If it doesn't fit right in right away like that did, then make sure that you do the rotation of that rotor to make it line up, because it sits in the inset there. It doesn't sit on top of the inset. All right, this is, I'll take that down by hand as much as I can. There's a little lip on this rotor, so you can use a closed-faced box wrench like this to clear it. You can also use a deep socket, whatever your preference. All right, I just picked up a little something on my bench. Let's get that off. Next thing then is the tie down. These tie downs keep that rotor nut from moving with the rotation of the reel. Sometimes it can shake loose, and then that becomes problematic. And what you'll find is you'll have uneven line spooling if your rotor nut is loose. It's going to kind of wind in a figure-8 pattern as opposed to a nice even pattern up top. So whenever I see something in and somebody's saying, well, my line is bunching, that's one of the first things you want to look for is the rotor nut tight. Okay, we're going to load this up now. Once you line that hole in the axle shaft with the hole in the Crosswind block, you can put your small retaining screw back in. It's a little Phillips head screw. And while I'm doing that, if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, or any maintenance procedure, if you want to leave that question in my comments section, I'll try and answer that question for you. That's the best way to reach me if you're having a reel problem, maybe in the assembly or whatever, or leave it on the emails on the business card that follows. I'll try and answer those questions for you. There is a phone number on that business card that follows, but if you try calling for the help in the reel repair, well, generally I'm in my shop working on a reel, and if I'm working on the shop, I can't respond to your voice messages quickly. So try to leave it in the comment section. That is your best answer almost all the time. This little plate here is going to provide the rail to keep that crosswind block in position. So you want to make sure you do that as you go along. I think what we want to do here is we want to knock this bearing out. This has a little lip on the case, so I think we want to take the bearing out first, put that in on the reel, and then slip the case over that. Like that. There you go. That is going to enable us to lock that in that way. We had a little trouble coming off. Remember, we tried to do it in an alternate fashion. We didn't need to, as it turns out, but that's okay. Go ahead and put the screws in on the side plate. And this reel is well made. For a single ball bearing reel, it's well made. Lesson learned here is if you don't take care of your reels, they're not going to take care of you. In this case, I'm sure that the owner of this reel knew it went into water, or got sprayed, at a minimum got sprayed by the water, and it wasn't hosed out thoroughly. They got all kinds of sand inside of it. My suspicion is it came back to the house, the cottage, the boat, wherever it was. Just went into storage when it didn't perform properly and then seized up, made that noise. So it's best to take care of a sanded situation right away, and don't think it's unusual to do that. I get people in frequently that brought me the reel that fell in the water the day before, and that's what you really need to do. You don't need to bring it to me, but what you do need to do is take care of the issue right away. Don't let it sit, because if it sits, you're only going to have trouble with that reel later. All right, there's just one bump guard. Sits like that. One bump guard screw. And then we'll just go up top. I'm sure that those drag washers are probably rusted as well. Rusted, sanded, or whatever. If the other parts are there as a problem, those will be as well. Time to put the handle on. Now it goes in a counterclockwise manner, which is normally an off, but it's going to the front of your reel. It's turning. All right, let's go up top to the bearings. I can see the top one looks like it's a little bit rusted. And the top is what's going to take all of the water. When that line comes in off the pole, it's going to go hit the button. It's going to seep down behind the crack. It's going to work its way into the drag stack. And you'll see here we got some rust. I'm hoping I have felt washers, or I have Teflon washers. I'm not sure. You can see that we have the rust in that cavity as well. It doesn't take a moment to clean that out. Now, you're never going to be able to remove the staining on a metal washer, but you can remove the pitting and the like. Internally, these are fine. It's that top one that looks like it's taken all the pressure. And it does look like we have some kind of a fabric washer here. So I'm just going to use a utility knife to separate those washers from that from the drag washer, the metal one. I'll do that on the other side as well. And this is a case where it's dried out, so these can be relubed and reused. There's a little bit of it that has got onto the main one, so we're going to use steel wool to clean up the metal washer. And again, you won't be able to take the tarnish or the loss of the chrome and restore that. That won't work. But you can clean up the rest and make it operational. There's a little bit stuck here. I'm going to just use that utility knife as a scraper. So some folks are going to ask, why should you spend this kind of time on a reel that probably is not as valued as your time? And the answer is that these reels will do what they want to do, or have been designed to do for a long time. And if you take care of it, it will take care of you. And it's worth putting the time in. You know, unfortunately, we're in a throwaway society here. And if you can save the reel, you may save the planet. This one's shot. I'm going to see if I can go find a replacement washer for that. As I said, I'm kind of a pack rat. I think I have one, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I went to my parts basket. I was able to find 2 Teflon washers. This one is a composite, like a leather washer. And the rule on these generally is you don't have to match them up exact. You can go smaller in a diameter. You can't go larger. That's pretty obvious, or should be obvious. If you go larger, you're not going to fit them in a hole. But I found 2 Teflons, and those are acceptable as substitutes. Wasn't able to clean the face side of that, but I was able to clean the back side, which is important here. I did lube the leather one. Now we're going to put a round or a keyed washer goes next. And I'm going to put the spool back onto the reel. And the reason I'm doing that now is because the Teflon washers are going to be slightly smaller in diameter, and I don't need them not lining up with that axle shaft. Next is the eared washer. That's the one with the 2 points that sits inside the cavity of the spool. Teflon washers don't get oiled or greased. They are a petroleum product by nature, and you don't need to do anything other than make sure they're clean. So that's your 3 drag washers. Here's the ring. Start with one side in the slot, and then just work it around with hand pressure until you seat it. Make sure that it's inside the slot. And we just put our star adjuster or our button on. Tighten it down, make sure that it works. And we will give this reel a test. It should be a lot quieter, and it should be ready to go fishing again. At least in theory. Alright, that's tightened down. Yep, we have a tight spool. Let's back it up a little bit. Yep, it's working the way it should. Alright, let's give it a try. Well, there you go. Very good. Whole different story and a different song it's singing than when it had this rusted bearing in it. So I will pass this on. This will be given a second chance, and that's all good. Just want to test that anti-reverse, make sure that we've got the anti-reverse, which we do. All right. So please, everybody, stay safe, stay well, and stay watching. To the first responders, thank you for everything that is that you do. To everybody else, let's do our role to keep safe as well. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.